in, out there like a carrot dangling in front of them for months and months and months. And so they just want to keep the prosecutor happy. They want their story to be whatever the prosecutor wants to hear so that they get the most benefit possible. They want to make sure that they give the government, the prosecutor, what they want, whether that's convicting another co-defendant, whether it's, finding other people who may have been involved in the case, whatever that motivation is.
All right. Well, thank you for that lengthy explanation. I appreciate that. And not to be mean, I respectfully disagree.
Okay.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever bought a house sight unseen?
No.
Have you ever bought a car sight unseen?
No.
Have you ever made any significant purchases of anything in material value that you have not seen?
Well, I just had to buy a new washer and dryer, and I did not see it in person before I clicked
buy.
And
right.
Home Depot, I'm expecting it to look like it looked on the Home Depot website.
On the website, right, but you actually saw a picture of it?
Yes.
Okay, so you knew what was supposed to come. Obviously, if it doesn't come correctly, you're going to send it back, correct?
Yes.
All right, so let me ask this. Why would a prosecutor make an offer and pay for something, so to speak, before he knew what the goods were?
Well, it's not necessarily I'm sorry, my watch is, I hate these newfangled watches because they ring all the time.
It's all right.
So the prosecutor isn't necessarily going to say, absolutely, no matter what kind of crap your client comes out with, I'm giving them an F2. So there is a certain amount of leeway. There's a certain amount of play, and there is always, again, this is why a proffer is so nerve-wracking for a defense lawyer. You always have to have a certain level of trust that the prosecutor is going to give you the value of your client's story. The value you place on it may not be the same as the value the prosecutor places on it. That's why I like to have everything written down.
Well, all right, written down is usually the proffer letter that you and your client would review and sign, correct?
Yeah.
And it's usually signed by the prosecution, correct?
Yes.
And again, we have to know the facts and circumstances of the particular case that we're dealing with as to what information may or may not be appropriate, correct?
Right. For example, like in that case I was talking about with the federal state thing, I told them, hey, my client saw a murder. So they knew that's where it was headed. That had to happen because they needed to reach out to the state prosecutor.
Don't you think that a prosecutor would be committing some form of either malpractice or ethical violation? If you came to me and said, I have a client, but I'm not going to tell you what he's going to say, but I want an offer, and I say, sure, I'll give you a class F6 felony off of the class 2 felony.
I would love that.
I'm sure you would, but that's not appropriate from the other side of things, correct?
Well, prosecutorial ethics and defense ethics are very different. The prosecution's duty is to do justice. The defense lawyer's duty is to do whatever they can to zealously advocate for that one client. So, in other words, the prosecutor can always say, I'm not gonna go through with this.
Mm-hmm. But
could you repeat the last thing, because I wanted to say something.
You're not going to buy something you haven't seen. Why would a prosecutor go in, and if I'm just sitting in my office and you call me up and say, hey, my client wants to tell X amount of or has information on this case that you're handling, but I'm not going to tell you any more about it until you tell me what kind of offer you're going to give. Why would I do that?
Well, and usually what you do is you're like, my client will tell you what the co-defendant did, mm-hmm. or what my client will give you access to their, whatever it is. Usually you've got, sometimes this is in writing in the proffer letter, and I have seen this and done this before, where you as the lawyer write up a little summary. My client saw a guy named Joe shoot somebody at 14th and Calumet on December 10th, 2020, or whatever it is. So you're not going in totally blind. You have some idea of what you're getting.
Okay.
And then you work on, I mean, there's always going to be back and forth plea negotiation usually.
All right. So before we get to that, I want to show you what's been entered as People's 217. Have you take a look at that for a minute, please?
Okay. Do you want me to read the whole thing thoroughly or?
Well, I assume you know what that is.
Well, I do, yeah.
Okay. That is what we would call a proffer letter. Is that correct?
Yes.
All I want you to note in there is if you see anywhere in there where there's any type of offer that has been made to that individual.
No, I don't see that.
Okay. And would you also agree that that is consistent with the example that you provided? And I apologize, I don't know which one, but the second judicial district proffer letter that counsel entered into evidence as well.
Yeah, you don't necessarily. So when I was mentioning sometimes you put it in the proffer letter, sometimes you don't.
Okay. So you're familiar with the term COCA?
Yes.
Okay. And COCAs are usually large, organized crime type prosecutions that involve a lot of people.
Yes, they're frequently a good proffer situation.
Okay. And you'd agree with me that a lot of those types of situations, the attorneys, defense attorneys, would go to the state and seek to proffer because they can maybe get better evidence against somebody higher up on the ladder or even below the ladder. Fair?
Yes, that does happen.
And in those types of situations, the same type of proffer letter is given out because nobody's going to buy anything or sell anything until they get the information to evaluate it. Is that fair?
I don't know if it's the same. I would assume it is.
Okay.
But I don't know I haven't looked at every single
Sure.
person's.
My point is that before any type of discussion about an offer after a proffer would have to be because you've had an opportunity as a prosecutor to evaluate the information compared to the discovery that's been provided and make the determination if that person is telling the truth, right? You corroborate things, you verify, that type of stuff. And if that's the case, then you can begin the negotiations. Is that fair?
I mean, that may be how you look at it. To be honest, I have not worked for a prosecutor's office since I was in law school. So I don't know exactly how prosecutors do it, but I would assume that it's some similar.
Okay.
You look at the case and you're like, I've got a hole here. And you say to the defense lawyer, if your client is willing to tell me about who he got the drugs from.
Okay. So you've practiced extensively is it Boulder or the metro area, or where do you practice?
I practice all over the state pretty much, but mostly the metro area and on the western slope.
So do you practice very often up here in Weld County?
No.
All right. Do you think it's a little, and again, I'm not trying to be demeaning. I mean, do you think it's a little broad to accuse defense bar in a certain jurisdiction of being incompetent because they don't do that? Because I'll tell you, that's not how it works up here.
I'll sustain the objection.
Would you be surprised to know that doesn't happen up here in Weld County?
Well, I have heard that in Weld County, because I also communicate with a lot of other people. My best friend practices in Weld County. My husband was a public defender here. So I have heard that going in and giving your statement to the prosecutor is a practice in Weld County.
All right. And you indicated that you had a tenure in Adams County for
I did
5 years.
5
All right.
years.
I actually prosecuted in Adams County for 17.
Oh,
And
wow.
I never, no proffer of that nature, no offer was ever made pre-proffer. Was
Okay,
that ever
that
happened?
wasn't the case when I was there, but we used to have to go, like on a murder case, we'd have to go to the head DA.
In terms of a proffer? Or are you talking in terms of a plea bargain?
plea bargain on a murder case or something
All right,
similar.
right. In regards to if you had an individual charged with murder at the public defender's office in Adams,